Hello, this is Breakfast with John Kay and Nina Warhurst.
8:35 Wednesday morning, and the Lionesses' Euros triumph last summer inspired young girls across the country to take on football. But some soon realised it wasn't always possible because their schools didn't offer it.
Well, it led to the women's team to write to the government, and today it's been announced that every girl in England will be given the same access to school sport as boys. Fee Lambden reports.
You can run around, and you can pass the ball, you can try and score. You're doing what you love and you're loving what you do.
The Lionesses centre stage, making history. Finally, England's footballers had a success story, inspiring girls and women right across the country. But this was just the beginning. They had even bigger plans.
We set out to inspire the next generation, we set out to inspire the nation, but girls in sport, I think it could be a really big turning point, and that's what we're really excited for.
7 months on, coinciding with International Women's Day, the government is now promising equal access in sport in schools to girls and boys.
So if the boys are playing football, girls can too. If the boys are playing rugby, girls can too, and cricket, etc., etc. So that we make sure there's more equality of access for all girls to be able to play all sports.
And the promise of 2 hours of PE per week.
It feels really brilliant because just knowing that everyone's equal is really important.
I'm really glad because I think everyone should be equal and everyone should get the same amount of sport.
For the Lionesses and their captain, it's exactly what they've been waiting for.
When we look back, we won't just be remembering the incredible moments that we experienced ourselves, but we're paying that forward, and we'll be able to see women's football grow in the way that it should, with the opportunities that it deserves.
And the cost, over £600 million across the next 2 years for PE and sport premium.
In a cost of living crisis, many will say, why are you spending millions on sport right now?
We often talk about prevention, we often talk about children's mental health, we often talk about fitness and obesity, and this is a big part of making sure that all children have access to all sports. I mean, they may not like every sport, but they'll get access to a wide range of sports.
Who scores the goals?
It's a big announcement, welcomed by Baroness Sue Campbell, who for the last 50 years has paved the way for women's participation in sport.
I think this is a landmark moment for physical education and school sport. It's an acceptance that it is important. It's not a nice to do in schools, it's a need to do in schools. Not just for the physical development of young people, but for their emotional well-being and indeed for their happiness. It makes me immensely proud of the Lionesses. They did a wonderful job winning the Euros in the summer, but this is as big a win today for every child in the country. This feels a really special day.
After their victory, the Lionesses wanted to create real change. With today's commitment of equality, time and money, women's football and women's sport will never be the same again. Fiona Lambden, BBC News.
Well, joining us now is Stephanie Hilborne, Chief Executive of the charity Women in Sport. I think what was perhaps most surprising to us this morning was that this wasn't already happening.
Well, I think the equal provision of team sport has been a major issue because there's still 20% fewer girls than boys that play team sport, so obviously football is one of them. I think the really extraordinary thing is that we haven't until this day been committed to offering that football, that rugby, that cricket to girls in the same way as we do boys. I mean, the Lionesses have made such a difference here, and Sue Campbell. I mean, all credit to them, because women's football has its own huge story, and the women who were banned from football in the 1920s used to go and raise charity money and make a difference to society, and that's what the Lionesses have done here. We should offer the same. It's madness not to.
You're right, it's seeing is believing, isn't it, for young girls? £600 million in funding over the next 2 academic years to back this policy. How will that be spent?
Yes, so let's just be clear. So the £600 million is going to the primary schools over a 2-year period for the PE sport and premium, which is for all kids, not just for girls. And then there's money as well committed, 22 million towards the school games organisers, the brilliant charity the Youth Sport Trust organises to support schools. That's also going to boys and girls. The big announcement here is the commitment that the same type of sport should be offered to girls as boys. This is not all going into girls' sport, just to be absolutely clear. And of course, schools are facing enormous challenges at the moment, and they do an incredible job, the teachers in the schools, to try to meet the needs of the kids, because as Sue says, in the end, children benefit so hugely from this. Our charity, Women in Sport, which Sue was a founder of in 1984, is passionate that the critical needs of girls can be met better through sport. We know about the teenage mental health crisis, particularly that girls suffer, and we know that the Lionesses have demonstrated the joy and freedom that sport can give you, and particularly team sport. We want it to be all about what the girls feel like, what the girls can do, and less about what they look like. So our charity has been publishing research, and this week we published research about primary girls, girls under 11, and we know still that we're stereotyping in a big way as society. So this announcement will go some way to address the stereotypes we still see, which is that girls should look pretty and do dance in gym, and boys should play the rough and tumble and play the football. Great, it's really good news.
Because there's so much to be learned, isn't there, through team sport, not just around fitness and agility, but those outdoor big team sports teach you so much about teamwork and, like you say, just letting go.
I think there's something about team sport that's very special. I think that sense of a collective cause, that sense of connection to each other, that the way that people will do things for each other to win that game, not being just solely about you, the leadership you develop, the resilience. I mean, the Lionesses showed that during the tournament, the resilience that you build as a person, not just on that pitch, is so important. It's something that women and girls have missed out on for many years, and of course some boys, but particularly women and girls. So we are really passionate to see team sport massively improved, and that offering needs to be at school, in the community. There are very many fewer opportunities in the community for girls still in the team sports, and I think a sort of deep acceptance by society about the role that girls and women play when it comes to that physical activity. Because what we know is that girls are going into primary school with less physical literacy, less fundamental movement skills, we call them, than boys. Because although parents are doing the best job they possibly can, they're not valuing the sport for the girls as much as they tend to for the boys, because they think they're not going to have trouble at school if they're not good at football like they might for their boys. So we've got a whole load of deeply rooted cultural issues we've also got to address around these important announcements today.
Let's hope this is part of the change. Stephanie Hilborne, Chief Executive of Women in Sport, thank you for your time this morning, and the ball rolling, of course, with the Lionesses.
You played, didn't you, when you were at school?
Yeah, but I played in the boys' team because there wasn't a girls' team. Girls just didn't play football, and so my only option was to play in the boys' team. And then when you become a teenager, that gets a bit tricky.
It all stops.
Yeah, so hopefully things are changing.
It's nearly 9:15. They don't care what the laws are in the UK.